you.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Council's Personnel Committee. I am Councillor Paul Hazelgrave and I'm Chair this year. And I'll hand over you to Dominic, who will introduce everyone else.
Hello, I'm Dominic Monaghan. I'm the Democratic Services Officer for this meeting. With me today we have Karen Squires, Lindsay Stevens and Stephen Mason from Democratic Services. We have Councillor Alison Holmes, Councillor Testro, Councillor Hazelgrave the Chair, Councillor Porpeg and Councillor McChrystal. And then officers, we have Liz Moore and Paul McMahon. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Have we received any apologies?
We have apologies from Tanya Hay. Thanks, Chair.
Good. So if members want to speak, I suppose the best way to do it is with that message. But if you don't seem to get any joy, do interrupt and let me know. I'll do my best to make sure that everybody gets their chance to speak, and there's no slight intended if the order slightly goes awry. Now, I have no late items to be introduced, so we go to declarations of interest. Would anyone like to speak at this point? Right, okay. If anything comes up during the course of the meeting and you feel you should declare an interest, then by all means do so at that point. Minutes of the meeting held on the 20th of December 2019. I wasn't on the committee last year, so I can't vouch for the accuracy of those minutes. Was anyone a member of the committee last year and attended that meeting?
Yes, Chair, I'll move.
Oh, thank you.
Councillor Holmes,
second? Sorry. Thank you, Alison. Anyone second?
I can second that.
Brilliant, excellent. Okay, so we now go to the apprenticeship project update. And I should say at this point, it was very regrettable that we couldn't meet for the last two occasions, but third time lucky, we've all managed to get on. I hope no one's kept out of the system or unable to attend. Can we make a start then on introducing that item, please? Liz?
Yes, thank you, Chair. If I can take you through this report on behalf of my colleague Tanya Hay, who unfortunately can't be here today. So good afternoon, and if I can take you through the Apprenticeship Project Update Report. As you be aware, the purpose of this report that we bring regularly to Personnel Committee is to provide an update on where we are with the Apprenticeship Project and some of the notable points of activity in the project currently, including how we're doing in terms of spend on council levy payments. And we've also included in this report some information about the retention rate for our new start apprentices once they've completed their initial programme, and we've also in the appendices included some comparison data about the ethnicity, gender and salary banding makeup of our apprentices and how that compares with some of our other councils in the Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire region. So Chair, if I could perhaps just draw the committee's attention to some of the key points in the report. I know members of the committee will obviously have read the report, but if I can perhaps just draw out some of the key points of note, and then obviously happy to pick up any questions if that's helpful. So from the supporting information, perhaps a good place to start is at 4.1.1, which is to perhaps set in the context that not only our apprentices, but obviously people around the country are managing their education and their learning within the context of a pandemic at the current time. And committee members won't be surprised to know that all of our training providers who we contract with have been responding to how they deliver their apprenticeship programmes in these different circumstances. Now, obviously, with the fairly recent government announcements that students could return face-to-face to education, so long as appropriate risk assessments and social distancing guidelines are in place, some of our providers have started to introduce classroom-based learning. Earlier in the pandemic, as you'll appreciate, it was very much all online and, online activity. Now, some of our providers are still offering a blend of online and classroom-based activity, but those who feel able to in a safe environment are reopening their face-to-face delivery. We have, throughout the pandemic as well, been offering advice and information and guidance to all of our apprentices about the support that's available to them, not only from the training provider, but from us as the council as their employer, to keep supporting them while they're learning in these different circumstances. Now, inevitably, the pandemic has had an impact as well on the number of what we call new start apprentices. Committee members will be aware we have a combination of new start apprentices and some of our existing workforce who then take up apprenticeship training while they're employed by us already. And we've only had 2 new start apprentices since March. Now, that is a situation that we're hoping to improve slightly, because we are sending out communications to our colleagues and our management colleagues that we are still offering new start apprenticeships, because it's apparent, obviously, that remote working for much of the council's workforce, but not all, will still be in place for a while yet. And again, committee members will be aware that certainly for our new start apprentices, a lot of what the apprenticeship programme is about is that sort of face-to-face contact with the team that you're working with, and that face-to-face supervision from the manager that you're working with. So that has seen a slight negative impact on our new start figures, as I say, but we are continuing to try and support managers to bring in new start apprentices where that's appropriate. We do still have quite a number of colleagues who are maintaining their management and leadership programmes through the apprenticeship levy, and 18 of those had asked to take a break in learning due to the impact of the pandemic. But we're pleased to say that many of those apprentices are looking to restart where they feel able. Some of those reasons for the break in learning may have been personal, some of them may have been service requirements. But we've been working closely with our training providers, including the University of Derby, to support those temporary pauses in learning and to facilitate when it's right for that apprentice to pick back up their learning programme. We have been still continuing to try and develop, as you'll see in paragraphs 4.1 and 4 and 4.15, some programmes in social care, and we have 5 colleagues on a social work programme in people services, and we're also looking at how we might be able to facilitate delivery of social care level 2 and 3 apprenticeship programmes, which is positive news. And one of the updates, Chair, that Tanya would always provide, as you know, in this report, is a bit of an update on the 25% levy transfer. This is where we are able to, if we meet certain criteria, enable local businesses to access some of our levy funding that we accumulate, and we are now transferring funds to a couple of local employers. And within the Economic Growth Service team, we've got a new colleague, the Principal Employment and Skills Manager, who's going to be accountable for helping to coordinate and implement a strategic approach on that, which will be, I'm sure, very beneficial in the city, again, in these challenging times. So that's a positive step forward and a positive move in recent months, Chair. We've also seen some movement in our procurement arrangements. Members of committee might be aware that previously we had an appropriate procurement framework in place with Nottingham City Council, who provided a cost-effective procurement solution for a number of local authority partners in the region, but they had concluded it wasn't appropriate for them to continue operating that framework, and that ended on the 30th of September. However, we've been working hard with our legal and procurement teams to make sure that we have an alternative procurement framework in place, and you'll see at paragraph 4.17 that we are now utilising what's called the Yorkshire Purchasing Organisation, having been through an appropriate procurement arrangement, the YPO, exactly, Chair. So there's been no break in us being able to have procurement framework in place, which is encouraging. Just a couple of other points that I draw the committee's attention to, if I may, Chair, and this is around a point that you're perhaps already aware of, but it doesn't harm, I'm sure, to just highlight this again, that the government had moved that all apprenticeship frameworks would be withdrawn and be replaced by standards. This is a national position, obviously, not just specific to Derby, and so those you're not able to go onto what was a framework, an apprenticeship framework, from the 1st of August. They all have to be on new employer design standards. And that does have potentially some implications for us and other employers, particularly around some of our perhaps traditional routes into apprenticeships through things like business administration or teaching assistants. But council officers are working on exploring how we can try and mitigate the impact of that national position, so those national frameworks being withdrawn. And there may be other relevant apprenticeship programmes that we can utilise that would fill the place of those previous arrangements.
Oh, good.
Which is hopefully a more positive position. So
definitely. Yep.
In terms of our levy payments, Chair, again, Tanya would always just highlight to the committee's attention where we are, and you'll be aware that we pay as an employer, as all employers do, where we have a pay bill in excess of £3 million. Since April 2017, we've been paying in 0.5% of our pay bill to the Apprenticeship Levy digital account, which is a national digital account from which we can then draw down within certain funding regulations to pay for our apprenticeship programmes. So we had paid in, as at the 16th of October, just over £2.5 million since April 2017 into that digital account, and we have drawn down just under £900,000 in total from that overall pot. And there's a breakdown, as usual, of how those funds are accounted for in the appendices. So perhaps, Chair, I could perhaps move the committee on to the information about retention rates and gender and ethnicity and salary banding. So there'd been a particular request to see what our retention rate was like, particularly for what we call our new start apprentices who come to Derby City Council, particularly on an apprenticeship contract. And since between 1st of January this year and 25th of August, our retention rate for new start apprentices, once they've completed their initial programme, is 75%. Which is encouraging. Still more to go if we wanted to try and retain everybody that we train through an apprenticeship programme. But
I think it's important that people make a decision at a certain point, whether it's for them or not, and they're quite young often, and they need to make that decision and move into something that is more of their scene. So I don't think it's necessarily a reflection on the council.
Absolutely, Chair, and I think that's exactly right. There are various reasons why people leave, sometimes to go on to other jobs, but very often they may choose to go on to higher education, at university or college beyond their apprenticeship. And if we've given them a good start to support that, then that's encouraging.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
And then there are a couple of appendices, Chair, that show, as requested, the breakdown by gender and ethnicity, and we've taken a couple of snapshots in November last year, March this year, and August this year, which we can have a look at in a moment if that's helpful. But also, just to clarify our pay situation for apprentices. So again, I just draw the committee to the points in 4.3.4 that currently, if an apprentice is between age 16 and 18, or they're 19 years or older, but in the first year of their apprenticeship, we pay the national minimum wage for an apprentice. And when they've completed 1 year's service of their apprenticeship and they're above 19 years of age, then they get their national minimum wage for their age group. And again, Appendix 3 gives a breakdown of what those payments equate to by age, Chair, and they're in line with national rates for apprentices, national minimum wages, I should say.
So on that, our employees in the round are paid. Many of them are paid above it, but if they're paid a minimum wage, it's the living wage as decided by the Living Wage Foundation, I believe, for mainstream employees. But apprentices are not paid on that; they're paid on national minimum wage.
They are within the council, Chair, and that's a decision that the council took some time ago to say there are legally laid down rates for national wage rates for apprentices, which the council currently pays specific rates, and that is different to the rest of the workforce. But that's laid down statutorily that we're able to pay apprentices those different rates because they're on that learning and training contract.
I understand, and I know Paul McMahon and I, and in fact with you, spoke about this, and Paul was talking about the whole legality issue, and apparently it's legal, but the point is it fair? And I just wondered what other councillors thought about this position. I mean, I would think we ought to be doing the same, be consistent for all employees, and then it's clearly fair, and it's what they're entitled to as employees of the council. But other councillors may have different views. No? Could I then suggest that we refer this to the Apprenticeship Board and ask them to reconsider the payments made to apprentices, and where it's appropriate, if the living wage as defined by the Living Wage Foundation is higher than what they currently receive, that this be changed to the higher figure. Would people be happy with that?
Sorry.
Would people be unhappy with that?
Hello, sorry, I can't get my mic working.
Oh, sorry, Alison.
Yeah, so long as that is fine through officers and they think that that's plausible, seems very reasonable.
So all we're doing is referring to the Apprenticeship Board, yeah? Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that, Paul. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Chair, may I clarify, if that's okay? So certainly happy to refer up to the Apprenticeship Board. If I can just check that the request is to consider the rate that we're paying apprentices currently.
Yes.
Because we and explore what options there could be for different pay rates for apprentices. Is that, because there may be a range of options, Chair, that the Apprenticeship Board may consider. Is that the ask up to the Apprenticeship Board?
Yes, and it's specifically those apprentices who are being paid the national minimum wage. Clearly, some are being paid higher, I would imagine, as they get older or whatever. But there are, I mean, it's small numbers, so it's not as if we're going to blow a hole in the council's budget by doing this. I just think it's the right thing to do. We've got youth unemployment of 21%, or it certainly was a couple of months ago, so it's probably higher by now. We need to have try and get young people to take the plunge and sign up to apprenticeships. That's good for them and it's good for the council, and it's a way forward for some young people, and they should be paid at the correct rate.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry to have interrupted you, but I thought that would be a good time while we're all on that specific point. Yeah.
Absolutely, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then the last point, just to draw the committee's attention to, is in Appendix 4. We've put together a breakdown as requested relating to the ethnicity and gender for apprenticeship new starts, and also compared it to in Appendix 3, and then in Appendix 4 we've also put some comparator data in terms of some of the councils in the Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire region, as you'd requested, Chair, just to put some context as to our figures in Appendix 3, and how we might compare, which is not unfavourably, I would suggest, with our other councils in the Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire region.
Yes, thank you for that, Liz. I looked through that and I thought it was, we come out quite well. I mean, we're obviously quite a large employer compared to some of the councils and organisations in the table, but it does seem to be more or less comparable, which is reassuring. That there's no bias any particular way from what I can see. I mean, I'm no statistician, and they are small numbers, so they will vary a little bit. So I hope everyone found that helpful in getting a clearer picture of the state we're in and how we compare to other local authorities. I was going to mention something, but I'm not quite sure what it was. Oh yes, going back to the earlier in the report. There was the issue about us paying in about 2.5 million, yes, to the levy board, and we've taken back 900,000-ish. Yeah. So what happens to the other 1.6 million?
So what happens, Chair, is if I just draw you back to paragraph 4.2.1, sorry if you can hear me, what happens is that after it's on a rolling period of time, and if we don't, and this is the same for all employers, not just the City Council, if we don't spend it within that rolling period, those funds expire, and then that money is available nationally, but we've lost our, as any employer would, our opportunity there. What I would say, Chair, is we haven't got the latest figures at the moment, because I think they've been slightly impacted by the pandemic, but we normally every 6 to 12 months have some comparison information as to how we're faring, if I can put it that way, in terms of our levy spend, again compared to other public sector bodies, particularly other local authorities, and our previous performance was strong in the region in comparison to some of our other local authority neighbours, but the national request for those figures to be updated is just being finalised now. So I don't have those figures currently, but we'll be able to provide you with an update as to how we're doing in terms of our spend most recently compared to other local authorities in the region.
I think that hopefully that will provide the committee with some reassurance, and obviously everybody's in the same boat. And I would imagine that as you said earlier, the uptake is lower than usual at the moment. Yes. I just wondered if it's also worth asking the Apprenticeship Board to look at the issue of maybe finding more recruits and encouraging our schools to recruit apprentices. Given, as I said earlier, that we have a youth unemployment rate of at least 21%, you know, if there are more opportunities, at least those people who are kind of really desperate to get something, but there's nothing there, they feel there's something coming up. I mean, it's small numbers again, but whatever we can do is good for us, I think, and good for young people. I don't know what other committee members think about that.
I'm happy with that, Paul. You're
happy? So are you happy if we refer this again to the Apprenticeship Board to have a look at?
Yes, fine.
Yep. Are you happy, Alison?
Yep, that's fine.
Councillor Testro?
Yeah, that's fine as well.
Yeah. And Councillor McChrystal?
Yes, that's fine.
Yep, good. Okay. I mean, we're just referring, and hopefully we'll get some feedback from the Apprenticeship Board whenever it meets, when it makes its decision, or whether it has to send it to cabinet or what. I don't know the machinations of it, but hopefully that will be considered and reasons will be given for or against acceptance of it. Yeah, thank you. Are there any other points that members would like clarification on in this report?
Could I just ask a question, please, Chair?
Of course you can, Alison.
Liz, it's a question I usually always ask Tanya. Unfortunately, she hates me, I think. But because we haven't had an update for a year, I just wondered if we got any better with the school in terms of enticing them to take on apprentices at all, or if it's still the same as it was before.
So, Councillor Holmes, thank you for that question. We do continue to still work with schools and encourage schools to consider apprenticeships for their staff where that's appropriate, and Tanya continues to have that dialogue with the school. I'm afraid I haven't got current numbers as to how many apprenticeships we have new starts in the schools, but again, I think, as you will appreciate, as I mentioned earlier, the number of apprentices that we've taken on either for our existing staff or new start has dipped during the pandemic, but that doesn't mean that we don't continue to encourage and, you know, work with schools when they feel in a position to take on an apprentice. So I will certainly flag back to Tanya your question, Councillor Holmes, and I know that she will be keen to continue, you know, flying the flag with the schools to ensure that they are aware of the opportunities available, the support that we can provide in terms of things they might need to consider, as well as obviously how they access the funding in order to support that. So I will definitely flag that again with Tanya. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So if I'm happy, obviously, to take any other questions.
Sorry, Liz, I think the Chair's just left the meeting.
Okay, I'll pause then, Dom.
If I'll just try and add him back in quickly. Are you there, Councillor Hazelgrave?
I appear to be kind of, the whole thing seems to crash, but I'm back in now. Is everybody else all right? Was I the only one to experience that?
I think it was just you. Right. If it happens again, we might just ask you to dial in, if that's okay. But we'll go as it is and see how we get on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, you can phone me and I'll go through the system. Yeah, I've done that already once. Yeah, thanks. Sorry for that.
Thank you, Chair. I was just responding to Councillor Holmes's question and then saying if there were no other questions, Chair, it was just to ask if through you, obviously, if the committee were happy to agree the recommendations in Tanya's report, please.
Yeah, just formally we'll go through those if everybody's happy, and then we're all clear what we're agreeing to. Thank you for the report. It was a well produced report, very helpful to everyone. And Alison's question about getting schools involved, I think we need to be pushing that, not only for the local authority schools, but for all the schools, trust schools, free schools, whatever they may be, to try and get them to increase their workforce through this system and getting, we're paying into it. Let's make sure we get full value from it. So the recommendations, 2.1 is to note the update on the apprenticeship project and the current key areas of work. We're all happy to agree to that, aren't we? Yep.
Yes.
Of course we are.
Yep.
Yep. 2.2. To note the levy payments made to date, the drawdown for training programmes that we've instigated and expired funds as of the 16th of October 2020. We're happy to note that, aren't we? Yep.
Yes, Chair.
Yep. 2.3 to note the retention rate for apprentices once they have completed their initial programme. Yeah, and we understood the fact that people decide it's not for them, and that's a good thing. You can learn a positive thing from stopping doing something because it might not be the most appropriate career for you. Are we all happy with that?
Yes, Chair.
Yep.
Yes, Chair.
And then 2.4 to note a breakdown on the ethnicity, gender and salary banding makeup of the council's apprentices and ethnicity and gender data for apprentice starts and achievements in the D2 N2 region. And we're happy to note those as well, aren't we?
Yes, Chair.
Yeah, and we have two recommendations, which I don't know how they ended up being reduced to writing. What do those recommendations say now, Liz?
Sorry, I've got those written down, Chair.
Yes.
Get through my notes. So we have to refer to the Apprenticeship Board whether the wage for apprentices should be in line with the Living Wage Foundation's level rather than the national living wage. And then we also had to refer to the Apprenticeship Board to investigate how to assist schools in helping young people to gain apprenticeships.
Yeah, I think that's it. And maybe one other might be that the board considers how we might increase the number of first start apprenticeships in the city through the council, and the council giving a lead. I don't know if other members would support that as something for the apprenticeship board to have a look at. We can't do any harm because we've paid that money in. We may as well get maximum value from it.
May as well look at it while they're doing the other stuff as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Everybody happy?
Yeah.
Good. All right then. Thank you. So we now move on to item 6, attendance management update. I know that the committee has traditionally taken a close look at this, and is anxious to see an improvement in attendance because it costs us a lot of money. As we all know, if staff aren't around, the productivity is forced to fall and all sorts of other things. So I assume, Liz, you'll be going through this. Yeah.
I will. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
Thank you. So if I can just take you through, as the Chair's outlined, the attendance management update for the Council's performance on attendance management at Q1 for this financial year, and also to just set this report within the context that our future focus on attendance management is really as an outcome of our leadership and wellbeing approach within the Council. As the Chair's rightly said, we do take supporting colleagues very seriously here at the Council and supportively managing their attendance, hopefully to help enable them to be well and at work, and a lot of that links to, as I say, how we lead and how we show our leadership skills with our colleagues and our focus on well-being. So it's setting the attendance management focus for the future within that context. So again, Chair, if I could perhaps take committee through some of the supporting information to give some of that context and then come back to the recommendations. Just working through some of the supporting information in section 4. For Q1 at the start of this financial year, we actually had a period actual of 2.2 0.24 days lost per FTE against a target of 2.36 days, and that is a decrease from the same period in the previous financial year. So comparing those two Q1 periods this year with last year, we have seen a decrease, and our performance in Q1 this year is better than our target of 2.36 days, which is encouraging. And one of the reasons for absence in that period, which you might not be surprised to hear, one of the top reasons for absence is around coronavirus or COVID-19, suspected and confirmed cases, as well as the other reasons outlined in paragraph 4.1.2. And perhaps helpful just to draw out another couple of points from the report on this. Obviously, as committee members will appreciate, the Q1 period, fell at the height of the pandemic, April, May, June this year, and it's having COVID-19 suspected and confirmed as the second highest reason for sickness absence in that period perhaps isn't too surprising. One of the things that we've also reflected on, obviously, in that period is many of our frontline services, of course, and key workers have continued working on the front line since the 23rd of March, before then, and have continued since the 23rd of March. But at the same time, the government advice in terms of staying at home and, trying to minimise the potential spread of the infection, many colleagues who traditionally would have worked in the council house or other bases around the city have been working from home pretty much all of their contractual hours since the end of March. And one of the questions we've been asked is, do we think that this increase in home working might have contributed to the slight improvement in the sickness absence rates? Do we think that that's had that positive effect? And it may do, Chair, but what we can't say with any degree of certainty is whether that's the case, because we don't hold data about how many people and who were working from home in the same period last year. So it would be hard to draw that correlation. But the positive news is, the positive picture is, there is a slight improvement in our performance based on, compared to the same quarter last year. And
I suppose on that, Liz, it would be an issue for each individual, because for some people it could be that home is a more stressful place to work than their workplace, their traditional workplace, the council house or Stores Road or wherever it may be. I hope that's a small number, but you never know, it could be more stressful for people.
Chair, potentially, yes, as you say, hopefully that would be for a small number, but you're right, potentially that could be the case. And one of the things that I think the council has been really, really clear on from the start of the pandemic, and it fits within our wider context of wellbeing here at Derby City Council, is keeping that focus on the wellbeing support that's available for everyone who's still working, whether that's at home when they're not used to working from home regularly, or whether that's still on the front line day in, day out. And I think if I could draw the committee's attention, Chair, to this section about our wellbeing approach, because your point is well made. We've continued to provide colleagues with a large range of advice and support, of information, support, avenues to get additional advice, both internally and externally, on wellbeing right from the start of the pandemic. And we continue to regularly update our wellbeing pages on iDerby, which is the council's intranet that colleagues can access. And in fact, we're just during this week relaunching some more information about our wellbeing strategy and the support that's available to help people look after their wellbeing, whether that's they're on the front line or they're at home, and as you say, Chair, perhaps for a variety of reasons, finding it more challenging working from home than they might have anticipated. And it might be helpful for the committee to know that we carried out a short wellbeing survey earlier in the summer, admittedly in June, primarily aimed at those colleagues who were working some or all of their contracted hours from home, when that was something quite new for them. And we had around 900 responses, which was a good response rate. And you'll see in paragraph 4.2.2 of the report that we had some really encouraging headline results from those respondents. So in this context of wellbeing, 91% of respondents knew how to access wellbeing support, 80% of people felt really well connected to their teams, and 88% felt valued and supported by their manager, because managers were, and are still managing remotely and leading their teams remotely. And also, encouragingly, 83% felt well informed about what was happening in the council. They still felt connected to what was going on, even though they were perhaps working in quite a different way. Now, we're by no means complacent about those figures. That was June, and we're actually launching this week another wellbeing survey, another snapshot survey, to ask some of those same questions, a couple of updated ones as well, but so that we can do some comparison, Chair and committee members, to see are those encouraging figures that we saw in June still there? Because obviously we're some months further into this different way of working and still working through the pandemic. So it'll be interesting. The survey's only open for a short period, less than a couple of weeks, and then we'll be doing some more data analysis to compare and see how our information may compare to how people were feeling in June.
Good. I think that's really useful to kind of take the temperature, so to speak, again, just to see if there are any trends or if people have got more used or more relaxed with the system and, you know, more kind of confident that they're producing to their best and that they're being supported by the council to the utmost. So we look forward to seeing that at the next committee. Yep.
Certainly, Chair, absolutely. Yep. We'll look forward to bring the results of that survey to you. Mm-hmm. So just really in summary, as I say, this is around attendance management, and the follow-on report that we'll be coming to later in the committee has some overlap on this wellbeing aspect. But again, there's no apology for that, Chair. This is really important piece of our agenda as a council in terms of supporting our colleagues and their wellbeing, both physical and mental health, during the pandemic and at all times. So it's also around, you know, as I mentioned earlier, putting it within that context of good leadership and colleagues feeling supported by their managers and their wider teams. Yeah. So happy to take any questions, Chair. And again, obviously, there are the two recommendations formally for the committee to consider also. Thank you.
So have any members any questions at all? I think if this were the same committee as last year with the same circumstances as last year, they'd be quite delighted with these figures. But of course, we are in a unique situation. But it is pleasing that the figures have gone down, because that means less money's going out, basically, in terms of wage bill. Any questions?
Yes, please, if I may, Chair.
Of course you can, Councillor.
Thank you. Liz, I was just wondering if there were any figures on people since the pandemic and, say, the same time last year when we weren't in a pandemic, although that's difficult to remember, how many phone calls have been made for wellbeing support team? So has the calls gone down considerably? I mean, considering that the very good figures saying 91% said they knew how to access the support. I just wondered if the figures had gone up or down or stayed the same, or if you don't keep figures.
Thank you, Councillor Holmes. I don't think we keep figures of that nature. It's a really helpful question that you've asked, but I don't think we keep figures of that nature, of the number of calls that had come through to perhaps the wellbeing advisors. The percentage in the wellbeing survey about the 91% of respondents knowing how to access the wellbeing support, I think that's also in a broader sense, Councillor Holmes, as well, as I know the committee will appreciate, in terms of some of the online support that's available, some of the information that we signpost people to externally, outside the council. And also, I mean, what I could ask for, if it's helpful, Chair, is, I'm not sure if they'll still have the same comparison figures, but we also have an employee assistance programme, which the council contracts an external body to provide 24/7 advice and support on a range of wellbeing issues. Might be financial issues, might be mental health, counselling, etc. I could ask my colleague if they've got some data, Councillor Holmes, on if they've seen a spike in their calls during the pandemic, if that would be helpful.
I think if we can get that, it'd be really helpful. Yeah.
Thank you.
Are we all agreed? I think that would be a really helpful snapshot of that, and it's from an external agency as well, which makes it, it's kind of something that's outside the organisation. And I'm not saying the organisation wouldn't produce anything, but I mean, traditionally, it's outside third-party figures are more kind of respected in terms of what they come up with, and it's objective, and it will be anonymised, of course.
Absolutely, Chair. It will. It'll just be sort of figures in terms of volume of calls rather than any breakdown that could identify no one. Thanks, Chair. I'll happily follow that up. Thank you.
So thanks for asking for that, Alison. I think that's a good move. Right. Are there any other questions or things people would like to look at on this item? So if everybody's happy, then shall we just look at the two recommendations? 2.1, to note the Council's performance on attendance management Q1 for 2021 was 2.24 days lost for each full-time equivalent colleague, FTA colleague, against a target of 2.36 lost per FTA for the period. Yeah, are we all happy with that? To note that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the other is a statement of fact as well, which I'm sure 2.2 we can read for ourselves. I'm sure we're all happy to accept that recommendation as well. Yeah, and note it. Yeah. 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 Good. Yeah. Excellent. Thank you. And so we move to the last item on the agenda. Item 7, COVID-19 and workforce response. So I think we might have had this information or some of it at other meetings, but it's useful to get this down as something of record from this committee, because clearly it's a really big personnel issue. So I hope colleagues who have read this are reassured and heartened by the work that people have been doing. Employees of the council, the kind of flexibility they've shown, the being up for a challenge, can-do kind of attitude, battling with IT, as we know from 2 abortive meetings of this committee and slight problems in this one. And I assume you're going to be talking through this as well, Liz? Yep.
I am. Thank you, Chair. Yep. Thank you very much for that introduction. So yes, as you've helpfully set the scene, Chair, this is very much a snapshot picture of how the council has been responding so far in terms of its workforce to some of the unprecedented challenges that none of us could have anticipated. Clearly, the report was written as well before the current period of lockdown that we're in. And again, I'm sure if committee would like future reports on updates, we'd very happily bring those. But this is a sort of snapshot position to reflect, as the Chair has said, some of the amazing work that's been happening across the council to keep vital services running in the city. So it's really just within that context, and that's, as I say, that snapshot, that you'll all be aware, of course, that colleagues across the council and more broadly across the country and beyond have been responding to this unprecedented circumstance. And the council's workforce has played a major role in making sure that we continue to deliver key services. And many colleagues across the council, and indeed councillors, but many colleagues across the council have adapted to new ways of working and maybe temporarily working in new roles or new services to help that coalesce around a common purpose, and we're continuing to build on that, and that is a helpful guide for us in our future service delivery, that when we can coalesce around a clear mission and purpose, it's a real strength of ours as a council workforce. So if I take you through some of the progress that we've made and some of the really outstanding achievements that hopefully reflect this at a really tangible level. We set up a hub earlier in the pandemic to try and match skills in demand for where colleagues might be able to help and support other colleagues to keep delivering critical services. And you'll have seen from the report that we temporarily reallocated colleagues into a variety of roles, including the community hub to help some of the most vulnerable residents in the city, the cemetery and crematorium, refuse collection, Derby Direct, organising and distributing personal protective equipment for council staff and for other providers across the city, to name but a few. They're just a snapshot of some of the key areas where colleagues have stepped in to help. And this has really been a great example of one of the council's core values, which is about great people working as one team. And we see that continuing to play every day and every week, where that that great team effort is continuing for the residents of Derby. And we've also obviously reviewed how that's worked over the summer months and how we might be able to adapt that and fine-tune that and keep evolving that as we remain within the pandemic. And we're also thinking, longer term, how can we best utilise this huge wealth of skills and experience that our colleagues have across the council in the longer term for the benefit of the council and for the benefit of the residents of Derby. And Councillor Hesselgrave mentioned in his introduction that, we've not only have people been responding really, really flexibly and stepping in and supporting their colleagues to deliver key services, but as we mentioned in the earlier report, there's many colleagues who may never have worked from home before or work from home intermittently who are finding that for some months now their regular work pattern is to keep working at home rather than their usual work location. So we've got a huge team of colleagues who are still delivering on the front line day in, day out, and we've also got a large group of colleagues who are adjusting to what that new environment is, working remotely. And as Councillor Hesselgrave rightly has said, our ICT team have really played a major role, in responding at pace to deliver both the hardware and the software and to step in and help us to ensure that we can still access the IT that we need to move to remote working and to, meet virtually as we are today on Personnel Committee rather than one of our usual meeting rooms, and to enable colleagues to be still responding to critical services and to our customer needs. And as well, I mentioned when I was talking about the previous report on attendance management about a real focus on leadership. Managers have had to adjust as well how they manage and enable their teams remotely, as well as those who are continuing to manage and enable their teams, with COVID restrictions on the front line. And particularly for those who are managing and enabling their teams remotely, it's really been about authentic leadership so that, managers and their teams have had to adapt to how they work and when they work, and that degree of flexibility that's there, that, it isn't always about working 9 to 5. People might need a greater degree of flexibility, and they can still deliver a really good service, and their manager knows that they are, but they might need a little bit of flexibility in how they cover their hours during the day. So it's a positive outcome of that is really been about us focusing on outcomes for the people of Derby, that being the focus, rather than, are people working their traditional working patterns if they need a bit more flex. And I think that's something that we can take forward as we continue to build and develop our teams across the city. We can continue to take that positive forward. I mentioned earlier about well-being.
I think that's a really good
Chair.
point. That generally the management cadre of the council has had to really develop some new skills for some of them, and they've done a good job because on the survey at 4.42 and in the earlier report, 88% felt valued and supported by their manager. Yeah. So there's a 12% shortfall that could be for all sorts of reasons, couldn't it? But it's good to see that managers have being totally conscious that they need to support their people. They need to check in in a non-threatening way and say, how are things going, can I help? Any issues with that report you're doing at the moment, or that piece of work you're doing, etc. And of course, as you say, the IT department, these things just occur, don't they? And the IT team have to kind of jump in and try and sort it out. And that must be quite a stressful position to be in.
Thank you, Chair. I absolutely agree with your comments. And yes, our IT colleagues have been doing and continue to do a tremendous job. And, again, it's back to this idea of great people working as one team, and the IT team knowing that, ordinarily their support is critical to service delivery. But in a pandemic, and when people need to be able to step in and work virtually like this, from a standing start for many people, then that has been a really significant achievement from the ICT team. And also thank you, yes, your comments reflecting about managers leading with authenticity and, as you say, checking in with their colleagues and making sure that colleagues feel supported. And it's about that authentic leadership and colleagues feeling, yep, I know that my manager's there, even though I might not be seeing them in the workplace like I normally do. We're checking in regularly, and they've got a supportive environment around them. So just a last couple of points, if I could draw the committee's attention to. We've talked earlier, haven't we, when we were talking about attendance management, about that wellbeing survey, and wellbeing and developing a culture where people take personal accountability for their health and wellbeing is a really key focus for us in the council. And again, as we touched on earlier, Chair, I've made a note, and I'm sure Dominic has, about bringing back the results of the follow-up wellbeing survey to a future personnel committee, so that we can do that sense check of how are things now compared to how they were in June. Another area just to draw the committee's attention to, and I know you'll all be familiar with, is obviously councillors and senior managers have been regularly acknowledging, the really great work that teams and individuals have been responsible for during the pandemic. And we've made a point of continuing to recognise and thank our colleagues when they've really gone that extra mile and really stepped in to help some of the most vulnerable people in our city, as well as often taking on, different activities, different roles to keep essential services running. And I'm sure you'll be familiar with the Here for Derby articles that our communications team have been running around, some of the great work that teams and individuals are doing across a whole range of frontline services, everything from volunteers in the crematorium to the public protection team and the fostering service, and also some of what might be called more traditionally, back office support teams, like our business support function that keeps some of our, post and scanning and, note taking and critical document management systems running as well to support those frontline services. So I guess some of the question is, what's next? Because this is a snapshot in time. So clearly we have seen, and we continue to see, colleagues, adapting quickly to new ways of working and helping to deliver reconfigured and existing services at pace. And I mentioned before about, colleagues and partners in the city, not just within the council, aligning around a common purpose during the pandemic and really working innovatively to try and achieve common goals for the benefits of the residents of the city. And again, Chair, I think that's one of the things that I'm sure you and other members of the committee have discussed in other meetings around this opportunity for that innovation, for us to hold on to that innovation and to not lose that spirit of innovation as we develop services with our partners in the city in the future. And really, collaborative working and co-production of solutions for service delivery and working at pace to help improve lives in the city is really where our priority focus is. And this does help to inform our approach to organisational design for the future. And again, Chair, there'll be opportunity, I'm sure, to update Personnel Committee on this in future reports. So, as always, happy to pick up any questions and appreciate, Chair, that the committee, through you, will need to consider the recommendations at Section 2. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Liz, for that run through. Have colleagues any questions at all on any aspect? Looking at the recommendations, I do feel we need to kind of put our weight behind all this, congratulation of staff and thanks to staff for really, coming up to the plate, stepping up to the plate. And over a long period of time and adjusting and, getting on with the work. We clearly need to thank our frontline workers who, are more at risk, are putting themselves more at risk by the nature of their being out and about in the community. And I think we ought to try and put that in as some kind of extra thing. The things we note, I'm sure we're happy to note, but I think we need to kind of actually ourselves as the personnel committee thank staff in all the staff of whatever department and whatever role they've taken on specifically for the period during this pandemic and this second lockdown now. I don't know what people think, but it would seem only right that we do that.
Yeah, good idea. I agree.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree. Sorry, I couldn't find me.
Yeah. James?
Yeah, I'm on board with that. That's great.
Yeah. Ross?
Yeah, I'm happy with that. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, in that case, unanimously, good. I'm sure you can put that into a form of words from my ramblings, Dom, which captures the spirit of that. Yeah?
Yeah, I'll get something written up, thanks.
Yeah, lovely. Okay, so we're happy to accept the 3 recommendations as printed, add a 4th one, yeah, and no one has any other questions. I don't know if we have a forward plan for this committee, but clearly we know that some things will update us on these issues. Are there any other kind of different kinds of reports that we'll receive in the next meeting, or are they just continuations of these ones that we have here?
It will be a continuation of these ones, and then there may be other reports that officers may suggest that they'd like to come to this, but I'll be in touch with you and the Vice Chair about those, and then we'll sort out the agenda for the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Don, for the work you do in the background, and thanks very much for all the work you've been doing, Liz, obviously day in, day out, and it's nice to see us finally come to fruition with this particular meeting.
Thank you, Chair.
So thanks to all for that, and I think that's it, is it not?
Yeah, that's everything. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, so thank you everyone for coming along and having read the reports and pitching in where you feel you want some reassurance or some further information. And I look forward to his meeting again in the near future. All the best, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Cheerio.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.